Okay.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone who signed up and has called into the Zoom meeting so far. My name is Joe Kalis. I'm going to be hiding behind the Colorado Mountain Club logo for the rest of the night, but I'll be your facilitator slash moderator, whatever fancy word you want for Zoom call operator during the presentation this evening, but feel free to send me a chat message if anything comes up. So it's our distinct pleasure to have Mr. Dean Waits, who appears to be known to many of you so far, presenting to us tonight, taking us on a tour through some canyons and ruins of places I've been and wanted to go. So I've personally been looking forward to this for quite some time. I'm sure you all have as well. A couple rules of the road as we get going. If I could just get everybody to mute their microphones, should be an icon down on the lower left of your Zoom screen. If you're having trouble with that, I will try and do it for you. But as Dean is talking, if you have questions or things that you want to get answered, please do go ahead and put those in the chat box, and we'll try to address them all at the end, or at least as many as we can. That way we'll have Dean's face on the screen and voice talking for as long as we can. But without further ado, then I'm going to turn the floor over to Dean for what should be an exciting talk. Dean, the floor is yours. You go ahead and share your screen. We'll get rolling.
All right. Let me see if I can figure this out. Yep. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Hey, well, thank you guys for signing up for this. It's great to have this kind of reception. And I noticed we've got a lot of guests on here tonight, and I want to extend a little special invitation to our guests for signing up. And if you haven't already looked at what we do here in CMC, I'd invite you again to go out and go to the same place you signed up for this presentation. Thank you, guys. And check us out. Look at what all we do. We do some fun stuff here in the mountains. And our primary goal is teaching. We have a lot of classes, and we want to teach everyone to go out to the mountains and be safe and come back from the mountains. So with that, I'm sure most of you have seen the different sites that we're going to see tonight, all these different canyons and things. But if you haven't, I'm going to show you what I have seen. It's a wonderful place. Now, these pictures are from my travels around from about 2012 to about 2019. And I'm going to try to be as accurate as I can with all the information, my interpretations of what I got from my research. But if, please don't write a book noting all the things that I'm coming up with. What I've found in my research is that there are a lot of experts, so-called experts, that don't even agree with the other things that they see. Now I want to explain the Red Sea right here. I've got a lot of different segments that we're going to be talking about. That's my little indicator that that's the last photo of that segment. Bummer. I'm having all kind of difficult. All right. Okay, well, somewhere or another, I'll get this all figured out. This is my next slide. Now, the experts, the researchers said that the Clovis people came to this area about 13,000 years ago. And these are the groups that eventually descended from the Clovis people. And you can see I've marked out the Anasazi. Anasazi means ancient people, and it's kind of been phased out to Ancestral Puebloans. For brevity, I'm just going to say Puebloans. I'll be saying it a lot tonight. But they showed up, the Puebloans showed up about 2,500 years ago. And the main well-documented group of Puebloans was about 500 BC. It was the basket makers too, period.
You're still on first slide.
You're not seeing the second slide?
No.
All right. So we were saying, everybody can see the map now?
Yep, sure can, Dean. Thanks.
Okay, good deal. Hang on. All right. Well, next slide I'm going to go to is show you why they named Bears Ears. If you look at these rock formations, these plateaus, to me, it looks just exactly like a grizzly. Now, Bears Ears, the size of the park is about 1.3 million acres to begin with, December of 2016. Then in December of 2017, it was reduced to about 201,000 acres. But I think that's still in the courts being settled. But the neat thing about Bears Ears, it has over 100,000 archaeological sites. And it's a real treasure trove of all the different things. Now, Bears Ears, like I said earlier, it started about 500 million years ago with the Puebloans, and it was vacated about 1290. So now all of the sites we're going to see, if you look, just use some straight math from 1300 up to now, it'd be about 700 years. But these ruins are going to be a lot older than that. Okay. All right, everybody see Kane Gulch Ranger Station?
Yes.
Cool, okay. This looks like kind of a gunfight right here. Everybody got their hands on their hips, but this is the ranger station where you go and you pick up your permits. And you also watch a video of what to do and what not to do in the park. And one of the most vital things that you want to check on here is where the water is located. It's real critical. We went there in April, which you'll see later on. We had plenty of water. There was a group that went there in May, right after us, and they had to do day hikes. They didn't have the same water source. Here we are at Bullitt Trailhead, and so we're going to go down in Bullitt Canyon. I went there in 2017 with this fellow right here. Eric Hunter was the leader of the trip. And so I'm going to be showing the 2017 and the 2018 team that we went in there. So you'll see a few different faces from time to time. Here's a shot going down in the canyon. Another picture of us making our way. Now we're going to go, I need to close some of this stuff, don't you think? All right, we're going to go over these paint brushes right over this area right here to our first ruin. It's called Jailhouse, and I have not been on this top section here, but you'll see right quick, they simply name these things real logically. You'll see why it's called Jailhouse. Now, the Puebloans were really good about putting rocks and then plastering over it. This is a ledge, and so that's the way they make their rooms. You'll see here is a room, what I'm talking about. They take the wooden slats, plaster mud on it, and there they are. And I think this was probably a wall. This was their entrance to this area. Cryptobiotic soil. Now, this is a thing that do as I say, not as this picture is. This is one thing you don't want to do. You don't want to walk through, make a trail through here. This is living soil. It's full of all kind of microbes and all kind of different things. It helps reduce erosion. It also helps retain the water out in these dry areas. A collared lizard. We'll be seeing a lot more of those later on. There's perfect Kiva. And this Kiva is a lot different from the ones that we're going to be seeing later on. But it is reinforced as a ladder, and they encourage you to go down in there. And it's funny, when you get in here, it makes you smile. But you can see the reinforcement up at the top. This is different in regards of the other Kivas that we're going to be seeing. It's about 15 foot in diameter. There are no places to sit. There's no ventilation. All the other ones we'll see are a lot different from this. After some water, so we don't have to dry camp. This is a funny little picture that it doesn't totally tell the story, but as soon as this food bag was hung, seconds after, the limb broke. Down comes the bag. Smiles turned to a different look. Now, this is a picture I took on the 2017 hike, and I was taking the picture because of these ruins right here. I was feeling a little puny that year, so I did not go up. But in 2018, we had a rambunctious group, and here we go up the slick rock. Now you can see here's another example of how they just plaster over the front. Got some boards here or some wooden sticks and things.
Dean, since your map is still up, can you point on the map where this is?
It's in Utah. So here we are. We're up here. We're right in this area. Thanks for helping me out. Okay, you can see this is the full cover right here. Inside, there's actually a wall that separates these two rooms. Now, I want to kind of point out this little seat right here. We sat up here until sundown, and I sat right there. You can see it's kind of polished. And so we sat there and we watched this event happen. There was a sundown. And as I sat there, it was really strange, the feeling that came over me. And I'm sure, like myself, there were thousands of Puebloans that had sat on that very same rock and watched this very same event come about. Here we are, we're hiking down Grand Gulch, and there are no signs other than cairns there in Bears Ears. You can see this trail's not very well marked. And you do this hundreds of times. You go in from the creek up to the top and back down. This is Green Mask Spring. This mask, this is kind of a close-up. It's probably about a foot tall. And this is called a pictograph. Unlike a petroglyph, this is just using some natural mineral and plant material to make this color. Now, again, you think this is probably older than 700 years. It's amazing that this is still there. And at this particular place, there were lots of different pictographs. Here's some other pictographs that are actually in color. It's kind of a rare sight. They are usually just white or whatever. And here's the spring. So this was probably a place where the Puebloans would stay to get water and plant some food. Typical shot on the trail. Another ruin. And we were trying to figure out some of the potsherds that we looked at, where they might have been made. And I guarantee you, these are the very first spoons, a tablespoon, a teaspoon. Another shot of the trail. A matati, this service, and a mano right here. They use these to ground corn or maize, or probably some other seeds that they might find. I can only imagine, this reminds me of maybe a Saturday at the laundromat with all these people here using this. Corn or maize. It's got an interesting story. It was created about 7,000 years ago in Mexico, where they would cross-pollinate various plants and grasses, and it rapidly spread to North America and Central and South America. Here's Split Level Ruin. This is a very well preserved ruin. And this is the reason it's called split level. There's a living level, there's some ruins up here, and this is what we were just looking at down here. See, this is actually exposed, but 700, 800, 900 years, still in good shape. And we've got a little help here. You always need this, somebody to point things out that you're probably going to miss. But there's two things happening here. This is a huge rock. It appears to have fallen down on this ruin below. And sure enough, our pointer found some stuff. You see a lot of this all over the park. And here's a lot of potsherds. There's some chert. This is the only potsherd pottery that I can really identify. This is called corrugated right here. I took this photo mainly for this cloth. They did eventually have cotton, And after I got to looking at it a little closer, I didn't know if this might be a sandal right here, but, and look, here's a COVID mask. I'm sure they were laughing on that. Turkey Pen Ruins. This is interesting. The turkey, I could see they'd be easily domesticated. We had a lot of turkeys here in our yard, but they were very, revered by the Puebloans. They found grave sites with full turkeys in there. But the main thing that they use the turkeys for, they molt twice a year. And it's weird because it's the only bird that you can pull the feathers out of and it doesn't bleed. But they would use the feathers to make blankets and coats. And they found a blanket that, of course, the feathers were already gone, but they counted the quills and they came up with 17,000 quills. So the blankets actually operate the same way as our down jackets that we use now. And this, I have heard, was not used to pin turkeys, but again, this is kind of the reason why they named this Turkey Pen Ruins, I believe. But it's really neat because these are just willows stuck in the ground. Now they're kind of up underneath the alcove here. But I think they did the same thing later on as game, small game was kind of hard to find. I think they did the same thing with their turkeys that we do today. I think this guy got pardoned and this guy was not. Some more pictographs. I think this was where Fred Flintstone got the idea for his car. Now this is a sandal made out of short leaf yucca. You can see they were well worn. The heel is completely gone. The forefront is worn out. But there were some little boys that were digging here at Turkey Pen. And I don't know if they didn't watch the video or what, but I would have probably done the same thing at their age. But they dug this up and I really literally had to sit down when I took this picture, when I was thinking of what I was looking at. And when I got back to the ranger station, the word was out that we had photos of the sandal. I had told the boys to rebury it, and I kept up with the ranger, and they went back out, relocated it, and reburied it somewhere there on the site. Now here is a replica, or it's not a replica, it's the same thing that we were just looking at. And see, it's narrow leaf yucca. And here's a heavier one, probably for winter use. When we went, this is at the Canyon of the Ancients Museum in Dolores, as it's called now. When we went there, it was called the Anastasi Museum. Here's Toadie's Canyon. It was our second night to camp. Of course, you can see the green tree. There's another spring here. Along the trail, going back to the Kane Ranger Station. And there we are. We all made it back. We're at the Kane Gulch Ranger Station. After this, we had some people to leave, more people to join. We're going to go into Fish and Owl Canyons. but you can camp on the BLM property out here. That was about maybe a 25-mile hike. Here we are, we're lining up, go to Fish and Owl Canyon. We're going to be going into Owl Canyon first. I can only think the words that were coming out of his mouth are his thoughts when he looked down into this canyon. We did find some ruins right near the entrance, not very far down into the canyon. Some more pictographs. Everybody still awake? Continuing down in the canyon. We made it down the bottom. Like I said earlier, we did not have a problem with water. Another stream flowing on down. Neville's Arch. One of the earlier pictures back in Bears Ears, there was an arch over there, but they're pretty amazing. I wish I was a leaf on this tree to hear this conversation going on. This was our first night to camp, and we're about to go into Fish Canyon. Now we've been talking about pictographs. Here's a petroglyph, and this was on a rock along the trail. This is called desert varnish right here, the dark coloration. And I don't know, it just looks like carabiners to me. I don't really know what it might have been. There were some other ruins, according to our maps. We climbed up on top of this and didn't find anything, but we looked. Up the canyon. There were beaver in this canyon. And there were bear in this canyon. It's always neat. This is our second campsite. It's always neat to see somebody reading the map, make sure we're in the right spot. Now we're headed up out of the canyon. Nice little cairn trail going up. You see the canyon, we're getting up a little higher. And there's one place right here where it wasn't very hard to climb. It's about 12 foot high, but we had to do a little teamwork to get our backpacks up. And there we are, all smiling and ready to tell the story. Another one of those Indian paintbrushes. Now we're going to go down to Moon Palace. one other person went with me down to this location. It's in Lloyd's, McLeod's Canyon. It's off, maybe off the road, the main paved road, about 8 or 10 miles. It would sure be handy to have a all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive there, or for sure a high clearance. But you need to get a day pass to go down here. There's no camping. You gotta go check it out and leave. But it's real interesting. This is an outer wall right here. We'll go inside behind it after a while and see what's on the other side. Again, they just put stone and cover it up with their wet clay. There were 2 pillows that were out on the front side of this. Now here's the outer wall that we saw earlier. Here's the inner wall. And there are individual rooms here. And we'll get a look at this little white stripe. Pretty neat. Have no idea what that meaning is, but they did the same thing inside. This is inside one of those rooms. Here's the white boundary. And I'm sure this black smutty area is probably from fires from inside. Pretty intricate work, the way they've used these limbs or roots to tie that in. But this is really the thing right here that just sets me off. This makes it very personal. When I look at this and I see the fingerprints, the thumbprints, and everything in this piece of clay. Now we're going to be seeing a lot more of this style over in Hovenweep. Now we're going to leave Moon Palace. We're going to go to the Natural Bridges. This is actually within the Bears Ears area. I want to try to explain how these things are made. This is a bridge right here. Let's say this might not be, but I'm going to use this as an example. Let's say this was the main stream at one time. Now this is sandstone. So eventually it starts to undermine the stone and creates this. And later on there'll be freeze and frost and so forth that will continue to enlarge that gap. I think there are about maybe 5 or 6 bridges in this area. We're trusting archaeological time by getting under here, making sure it doesn't break and fall. And we're climbing up, climbing out. Now this might be a Stella and Louise moment right here. This is the Bears Ears Plateau that we've been on. There's 1,200 feet from here down to this area. Here's the road down below. And it's connected by, or you get down there by a 3-mile road called the Moki's Dugway. And as you can see, it's just a little series of switchbacks to get you down there. Now we're going to go to Monument Valley. I've been here twice, so some of these pictures are probably from each one of my visits. I sent these pictures to a friend, told him I'll put my tent right here. And he sent me this picture back to point out I was very close to death. Now, as I said, this is Navajo country. And the Spanish gave them that name. They were actually Dene, that's what they call themselves. Here's a hogan. And when you drive around through these reservations, every house seems to have a hogan. And there are a lot of different styles. I don't think you really see a lot of these. They have a lot of bus tours. When I was there, they had these buses just filled up to capacity. They also have horse tours, and they also have some places where you can camp, paid camping with showers, as well as just backwoods camping. They do a good job of labeling the different formations. And I don't know why they get into making all the cairns, but these things multiply. This is a good pastime. I don't remember what this formation was called, but I would sure name it Coyote Howling at the Moon. If anybody knows what that is called, might put it in the chat. Like I was saying, this is Navajo country. Now the Navajo and the Apache, they were both from Canada. Their language was the Athabasca dialect. I love this picture. Of course, here's the three sisters, but this exactly looks like a grizzly bear. Now they have a museum there, and look at this basketry. Look at the work that's put into that. It's awesome. And of course, the Navajo were the code talkers in World War II. They really did a lot of beneficial help. Canyon of the Ancients. Now, this is the one that I said used to be, I had to change this slide, this photo, because before it was the Anasazi. But this is about 176,000 acres of BLM land, and it actually has the heaviest concentration of the ruins when people were moving out of other locations. My niece in Cortez sent me over to Sand Canyon, and I went over there one afternoon, kind of late, and I went on my mountain bike. And I'm not much of a mountain bike rider with a camera looking for ruins and trying to stay on a single track trail, dodging rocks. So this is actually the only ruin that I saw. But like I said, there are lots of them. They have maps and roads where you can actually drive back, a lot of trails that you can follow to go to the different sites. Now, I'm a member of the Colorado Archaeological Society, and I went down to Cortez to participate in a dig. Now, this is the owner of this property. You can see down in this deep hole, there's some wall structure there. And there's something going on over here also. But what I ended up doing was working right here. We worked here for 4 days. And here's my trowel, here's my scoop, and there's my knee pad. There's a pick. And so you scrape along, and we found a lot of turkey bones. We found a lot of potsherds. We did not find any arrowheads, but we'd fill these buckets up. And here, after 4 days of work, we finally abandoned this area and we went down here. And the reason you use your trowel to scrape, you might come up on a discoloration of the soil that might indicate there was a fire there. Now there was some people that dug a deep hole, and they did find a hind leg of an elk bone that had not been busted to get the marrow out. So that was kind of odd. This was my favorite job, taking all the spoils that everybody scrapes up, going over here and put them through the sifter, pick out all the things that you can find. Now from there, Cortez is up here. We're going to go down to the Aztec Ruins, and then we're going to go down here to get to Chaco. Now, as you can see here in this area, these roads are like a maze. I left here, I don't know, maybe 5:30 or so. And by the time I got down here, it was, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 o'clock, starting to get dark. And I finally found this road. I got to Chaco and slept in my truck. And it was, I don't know, maybe 10:30 or so. Over here is Shiprock. Still with me. Here's Aztec Ruins. Now, the early settlers came here and they thought the Aztec built these. So as sometimes happens, the name sticks. These ruins were first excavated in 1916. I love the strip of black stone that's through this area. Now, the neat thing about Aztec, they have recreated a Kiva in a kind of a life-like situation. And this was done in 1934. And it's pretty realistic when you go inside. As you enter, they have recorded drum sound. Now, I have done a lot of research. I have not found what these circular pieces of limestone are. So if anybody can know what those are, that'd be a nice thing to put in the chat. They're in most of the real kivas that you see. See the roof structure, and this is the opposite stairway. Do you go out? Let me get up a little bit. Here's a Chaco. Now, Chaco is a real interesting place. It was mainly for ceremonial and trade. It seemed like more than a farming community, and they built about 400 miles of road here, and their roads were 30-foot wide, and they scraped them down to bedstone and or bedrock. And most of the large buildings were lined up with the cardinal directions or lined up with the moon or the sun. And you can see this is just out on the plateau in the prairie. Here's some of the ruins. we're getting in to see the size of these buildings. This is a large piece of outer wall. It looks like right here, it might have been spliced together or something. You can see the multiple rooms, huge, really large. Big, thick walls. Ranger doing what rangers do, explaining the things on the signs. And if I have any birders in the group, this is a Say's Phoebe. And this Kiva is about 70 foot in diameter. And you can see here's the area you sit. Here's some, I guess, vents. Here's some more of these circular stones. Richard Weatherhill. This guy was a rancher. He turned archaeologist, and he started out over in Mesa Verde. And I guess at that time, he was probably like most of the archaeologists. He kind of fell out of favor with people, but he would sell his pots and different things he'd find to museums and into personal collections. So I kind of thought this was interesting. The guy that did the rock work didn't really get the email or the notation how to spell his name. Now you'll notice he died in 1910. Marietta died in 1954. Richard met his fate. There was a argument or a fight between one of his hired hands and a Navajo. And so I guess you could say, like an old Doobie Brothers song, he wound up on the wrong end of a gun or maybe a knife or whatever. Hope everybody's still awake. I didn't look around for a lot of petroglyphs. I found this panel. It's got some interesting things on it. And I found this panel. Now, Chaco lasted about 300 years. It reached, it was kind of really going good about 850. And from 1100 to 1200, there was no more buildings done. There was a really bad drought from 1130 up to about 1180. And a lot of these people started leaving. A lot of them moved to Mesa Verde. Shiprock. Shiprock is an ancient extinct volcano, and it's holy to the Navajo. There's a close-up. You can see a good shot of the vent, and this is visible from a long ways away. I saw it up at Cortez from one of the mountains up there. Canyon de Chelly. This is another Navajo site. When you go here, you have to have Navajo guides. And these guys, this fellow here he's certified. I was lucky, I got two. This fellow here was doing his certification. And this fellow had never been off the reservation. This guy he'd lived in several different towns all around the state. So his personality was a little bit different, but they were really good at what they did. I went on the hike. You can go on a Jeep tour. You can go on a horseback tour. I think I paid the group maybe $20, $25. And of course I tipped each one of these guys when we finished. And there's a lot of desert varnish on these rocks. There's a little ruin down against the wall. It rained really hard the night before when I was there. I didn't even put up my tent. I slept in the truck. So I think this is some of the water that was left over from that thunderstorm. Some more ruins. The Jeep tour going through the water. Some more ruins. Now this was interesting. This is the only place I've seen petroglyphs with a horse. Now the Spanish were definitely here. They created a lot of trouble in between them and the Navajos, but there's actually another horse petroglyph up here. I did not see any pictographs. All of them were petroglyphs. And this would be really hard thing. They take a rock, some kind of stone, and just hammer to make these indentions into this sandstone. Can I pull this down? Well, so there's some more petroglyphs. Now, as we were leaving this canyon, it came another little shower, and I quickly observed how a flash flood happens in the canyon. It was just a quick shower, but the water was coming down gully very fast. Now we're going to go over to the Navajo National Monument. A little farther over into Arizona. This is the real deal, Hogan. This looks very, very old. Betatakan ruin. For me, I hiked about 3 miles round trip. You can go on a guided tour, and it's about 5 miles. And we're going to take a couple of closer looks at these ruins. This is interesting. Most of the civilizations living in the cliffs and this sort of lifestyle kind of ceased around 1300, 1350 or so. And they moved from Betatakan over to a place called Seal. Now, I didn't go over there. It's about a 17-mile round trip hike, but you can get a permit to go in there for 2 or 3 days, and or you can get a guided tour to take you over to Seals. Goblin Valley Visitor Center. I went here with a CMC canyoneering class, and I was in the kind of the beginner canyoneering. They do offer an advanced canyoneering class where you actually rappel down into the canyons. We're going to go over to the Goblin's Lair. Oh. And this is the scenery that you see over on this side, whereas you see canyons on the opposite side in the San Rafael swell. This would be a bad place to be if there was a thunderstorm. And you never know who you're going to run into in these places. I'd call these hoodoos, and it's kind of interesting how they erode. Evidently, this surface is harder, and they're kind of dissolving down below. San Rafael swell, and as you can see, there's some pretty large canyons. It's always interesting to me. As we know, the ocean was over this area for a long time. I don't know how much of this was eroded from water, how much from wind or frost and so forth. But when you go up inside, there's actually a hole up through the roof, right in here. Now we're going to start going into the canyons. Takes a little teamwork to get up these canyons. This is a sand dune turned into solid rock. You see a lot of this all through that area, and in Zion National Park, you see the same thing. These things get really narrow. A lot of times you'll run into a big mud puddle of water that can be kind of cold. Here's some pictographs here. And I don't know, this kind of looks like a shovel. Interesting, I guess a cow or some kind of animal. And right over in here, this kind of looks, this right here kind of looks like a person, but it's starting to flake away. These are pretty looking ombres. I don't know if I'd pick them up on the street though. Some more of our members on our canyoneering team. Now it's interesting when you're going down these canyons, you might look up maybe 30 or 40 or 50 feet above you and see a huge log that's lodged up there. And this, when you do canyoneering, you really got to watch the weather. It can be raining 30, 40, 50 miles away from you. You'll never see the clouds, you never hear the thunder. All you'll see, if you're unfortunate, is a wall of water coming down through here, and there's no place to go. Well, like I say, check this out, CMC, canyoneering. I think it's usually in September, October. Now, imagine a lot of you have been to Mesa Verde. Mesa Verde is an old park in two regards. Teddy Roosevelt and Congress made it a national park in 1906. The early settlers, and it might even been Clovis people, about 7,500 years ago, they started settling this area. And there are about, eventually, there were about 5,000 ruin sites, and about 600 of those were cliff dwellings. We're just going to go in here and take a look at a couple of the ruins. Cliff Palace. There it is from up top. And you can sure get ranger tours to take you around and explain things to you. Here's a little closer view. When I went out there with our family, I have lots of video of rangers giving their talk. And we're going to go over the spruce tree house. Oh, this gets old. I wish my thing had worked. There's a close-up of spruce tree house. Now it's interesting here in Mesa Verde. This is all kind of in the Puebloan region. Now, like I said, when Chaco kind of shut down in the 1200s, whenever it was exactly, a lot of them moved to Mesa Verde. And this is I think a little overpopulation and scarcity of food. But shortly after this, Mesa Verde was pretty well vacated at 1260. Shortly after this, the archaeologists discovered a lot of warfare a lot of fractured skulls and so forth. So there seemed to be a lot of fighting that went on. And like I say, this like Bears Ears was emptied at 1290. This was emptied about 1260. Totally different civilization. Now we're going to go to Taos. Taos, the town of Taos itself is a pretty little artsy, crafty type town. But of course, Coronado came here. Tiwa Indians came here in about 1300s. There was a church Spanish helped them build, or they got the Indians to build it, trying to Christianize the natives. Now here's the Pueblo. There's a lot more buildings than this. Here's Red Willow Creek, and there are a lot of Tiwas that live here year round, and there are some that just live here part time. And you can see the ladders that go up to different areas. Now, for all of the grief that Coronado probably brought on these Indians, he actually taught them a skill. Either him or someone in his patrol taught them how to make adobe bricks. When he got here, the Tiwas were making or adobe out of baseball-shaped balls, and they would stack them up. But the Spanish taught them how to make the brick, dry them in the sun, and they were a lot more efficient. And that technique rapidly spread around the area. Now we're going to go to Hovenweep. Hovenweep is on the edge of Utah, barely in Colorado. Here's another collared lizard. Now I put this date up here. I went here a couple of different times. I saw this guy, and he looked very similar to the one we saw in Bears Ears. Saw this on June the 1st. And maybe some of y'all know the reason for the different colors. Here's one I saw just a few days earlier on May the 30th. And he doesn't have all the coloration, a little different. But this next guy, he's like dressed up in a clown suit. He's really colorful. I saw him back in April. So I don't know if that's anything with their mating. I think they're all, for sure, as far as I can tell, collared lizards. Here we are in their different architect. I said earlier we were going to see some of these white stones. This is Hovenweep. They did a little extra work there. They actually rounded these stones, and it's a lot smoother. We're going to go over to Holly. And we're going to see a petroglyph over there. Pretty interesting petroglyph. I put this picture in there. It goes on and talks about the way they did their masonry. But there are 6 different sites here in Hovenweep. This little site up here is called Cutthroat. You really need a 4-wheel drive or a high clearance vehicle to get there. These other ones you can pretty well get with a regular car. And I ran onto an old prospector out there. I don't know what he was doing, tinkering around in the rocks. This is the building that we looked at back on the sign. Now look at this, how it's built on top of this rock. And, you know, it's just really wild how they did that. Now, as I said earlier, there was a lot of warfare around this area, and they started building towers. I do not know if this was a tower for that purpose or not. Here is the building we just looked at, and I'm going to have to apologize again. I'm apologizing too much tonight. But over in here is going to be the petroglyph that we look at. It tells the summer solstice. the longest day of the year. And it's going to be right under here. Next slide, we'll get a better look at it. Here are two spirals, one right there and one right here. This is supposed to represent the sun. And now on June 21st or thereabouts, you can Google this and look for the Holly petroglyph, and you'll see a shaft of light coming right through here. We'll get a little closer look of the ones that are down on the left there. Here's a better sight. Here's the circular spiral, and here's the representation of the sun. Everybody on their second drink by now?
Oh, heck yeah.
Really pretty cactus. There's the picture. This is Sleeping Ute Mountain. This is a holy mountain to the Ute Nation, and it's over fairly close to Cortez. Hovenweek Castle. Now this is a solar calendar. The sun will shine in here at different times of the year. It predicts both summer and the winter solstice, and the spring and the fall equinox, which are the same length when the days are the same length of time. And here we are, we're closing out Hovenweek. Now, I want to take you to a little bit that was not advertised in the Pikes Peak, but I think most of you guys, some of you guys, will remember the year 1973. Now, I graduated from college in 1972. A month after that, I fixed up a farm truck and I borrowed a camper from my brother. Me and a college roommate, we took off for the Wild West. We covered 17 states in the western part of the US. Went into Canada, and we came back. And like I said earlier, I really like to travel. I got that bug, and I went back to work for the Santa Fe Railroad, the group I'd worked for while I was going to college. And I bought me a 1967 blue and white Ford pickup. And I bought that camper from my brother. And I took off south of the border. I entered Mexico at Laredo. I had to pay $20 to get a 6-month visa. But I went over to Mazatlan, went all completely down the west coast. When I got to Acapulco, I turned inward. I came to Mexico City. I spent a few days there in Mexico City. And then I went out. This is my first ruin that I saw in Mexico. And this is Aztec Ruin. We're looking at the Pyramid of the Sun. There's also a Pyramid of the Moon here. Now, at the height of their civilization, there were about over 500,000 people living here, over 4,000 structures. This was a big area. And it kind of fell out. It seems like the natives didn't like what was going on with their hierarchy. And about in 650 to 750, it, as a powerhouse, it really kind of dissolved. But people remained living there. From here, I went over to, in the state of Chiapas, over to Palenque. And then from Palenque, that was my first, I keep forgetting. That was my first Maya ruin, was Palenque. It was real interesting. Then I went a little farther down the Yucatan Peninsula to Chichen Itza. And this is the Castillo here. And it's interesting what they knew to do with the seasons and all the length of the year and everything. If you count these stairs, there are 91 stairs up 4 sides. If you multiply that by 4, it's 364. When you step up here on the top, that's 365. Now, over here is a door. You go inside the castle. I snuck in, saving a few pesos. You had to have a ticket to show to go in to see this. There's a jade studded jaguar in there. No ticket, no go. So I missed that part. But an interesting thing about this, and like I say, it's amazing what these people could do. Here is the northeastern corner of this pyramid. And next picture, I'll show you what happens there on the spring and the fall equinox. Whereas the sun's going down in the west, it casts its shadow along these ridges. And here's a little shadow right here. And they say that this looks like a serpent, a feathered serpent when it goes down. But I don't. It just amazes me what these folks could do. This is a stele. Now, since I was there, we didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue what these things meant. But there's a story on here. This might have been the ruler at one time of Chichen Itza. There are other stories in here. But here's hieroglyphs. This is a written language right here. So by using that, they've been able to decipher a lot of events that went on throughout this area. Here are some hieroglyphs. This actually tells a story. So it's really amazing. Now they had a little recreation down there. This was a ball court, and here's the goal. And there's another opposing wall. This looks like that over here. I don't know if these people are talking into that wall and somebody else is over here listening, but the acoustics here are awesome. You can do that. You can talk into that wall and the other people on the other wall can hear you. This was a pretty neat little game. They had a hard rubber ball that they played, and they could only hit it off their thighs, their hips, or their shoulders. Had to keep it in the air and put it through this little hoop. So that would be a pretty tough athletic sport. I don't think they have a Super Bowl on that. But from here, I drove down to Cancun. Now, this is kind of how Cancun looked when I was there in 1973. They kind of started with the idea of the hotels and everything in the 70s, but they really didn't come up with the funds to build Cancun until 1974. There was a little restaurant down in here, white restaurant that we would go to. Now, on up this direction, I'm sure, was where I parked. There were bulldozers and were pushing over palm trees and pushing sand. Right across from where I parked, there's a ferry that takes you out to Isla Mujeres. And I went out there and rented a hammock and spent a couple of days out there. It was a pretty interesting time. From there, I went down to Tulum. Now Tulum, this looks a lot different now than when I was there. They've definitely gone in there and rebuilt it. But this is located probably right across, there's a barrier reef through here. There's a break in that reef that goes there. The island of Cozumel is on farther out. And they would build a fire, a signal fire, so the boats and the canoes and things would know how to come through there. Now, this was one of the older Maya sites, occupied sites. It actually was still in operation when the Spanish came. It lasted about 80 years. Most of the people died of old world diseases. And so that's the end of that story there. But here, this area, as I understand now, it's very commercialized. Jailhouse, an inland lagoon with freshwater and saltwater, so there are all kinds of tropical fish in there. I used to go over there and snorkel. I watched my first solar eclipse. I had 2 exposed strips of 35 millimeter film, and it's a wonder I'm not blind, but it was pretty neat. I spent 1973 Christmas here. I spent 1974, I saw the new year come in, and I had a camp right about over in here where these palm trees are. And there was a guy came through every day. He said he was the owner's son. I don't know, maybe he was, but he charged me 8 pesos a day to park my truck there. That's about 64 cents then. Now, one night I set up my hammock in between 2 coconut palms, and it rained during the night. So I went in and slept in my camper. And when I came back out to get my hammock the next morning, there was a coconut that had fallen right about where my head was. So I don't know if that'd been a rude awakening or maybe some kind of wake up call, or I don't know, might knock some sense into me. I don't know. But when I left Tulum, I was going to Guatemala. And to get to Guatemala, you had to go through what was before called British Honduras, now called Belize. And the word was that you had to show $700 to get your 7-day visa, which you could easily drive across this country in a day. And I was down about, I don't know, $400 in traveler's checks. And if you remember how traveler's checks used to look, you couldn't tell one currency from another. So from here, a German fellow was going to leave with me. And so I took some Deutschmarks, made $300 or $400 worth of Deutschmarks from him, interlaced those in my traveler's checks, and we pulled up to the guard, and he gave us a visa, and away we went. And we showed up in Tikal. Tikal is in the northeastern corner of Guatemala in the Petén area. Now, this is the Temple of the Jaguar. It's about 148 feet high. I went in there. You could climb all over these ruins. There are a total of 6 of these ruins there in Tikal. And from deciphering all of these hieroglyphs, the archaeologists have learned that the city of Teotihuacan raided Tikal in about 300 BC. And they ran it for maybe, I don't know, several centuries. A lot of warfare was going on between these different city-state Maya areas. Copan was another powerful area. They came in and they actually took over control of Tikal later on. But by 900, Tikal was abandoned. And in 2016, there's a new technology, a 3D laser technology that came out, LIDAR, L-I-D-A-R, and light detection radar. And they fly over in a plane, and they take 3-dimensional pictures of the Earth. And by doing that, they have discovered over 60,000 ruins. The jungle takes over things pretty quick. But by using that, they estimate there might have been 7 to 11 million people, population at Tikal at one time. Now, some of you might remember the OPEC oil embargo. I kept a diary of all this stuff. So on December the 10th, 1973, I pulled up to a Pemex gas station there in Mexico. I had no idea why the price of gas had increased from 28 cents to 40 cents a gallon. But when I was in Guatemala, a lot of places didn't have gas. The gas was a lot more expensive. So I had met a fellow that lived down near the Guatemala southern border next to El Salvador. So I left my truck there at his ranch, and I took buses and hitchhiked on into El Salvador and Honduras. I went as far as Tegucigalpa, Honduras, the capital, and turned around, got my truck, went back up to Guatemala City, started buying blankets, and I went to Oaxaca, doing some more of the blanket purchases. And I headed back to Texas. So after 6 months and over 7,000 miles, I experienced my first bit of culture shock when I crossed the border and started going into stores in Texas. So it was a fun trip. I'm really glad that I got to do this when I did. And there we end, the bitter end. Again, I apologize for all of my non-computerization, but let me put that up there. So any chat box questions in there, Joe? Hello. Maybe I need to, what I need to do, I think.
You can stop sharing.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dean. I really appreciate your time tonight getting that put together and presenting everything. And thanks to everyone who joined us in the audience and for bearing with us as we got started. I noticed we had a couple of questions that came up as we went, and it did look like a lot of those got answered by some of the other attendees. But I did have one that just came through right now. Looks like Heidi Wigan nicely wants to know what you've got your sights on next, Dean, and when we're able to travel again, where are you planning on heading to?
Oh, I don't know. I'd like to go back to Bears Ears, or I'd really like to go back to the Grand Canyon. I have a lot of some good experiences in the canyon, getting off the main trails and getting back into the wild. So probably the Grand Canyon would be high on the list.
Well, that sounds good. Count me in if you head down the Hermit Trail or the Tanner Trail. I'd love to get back in there myself.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the group tonight before we close things up?
I'd have to wake them up.
No, thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome.
I want to thank you also from the Easons in Austin, Texas. We have enjoyed it very, very much. I think we're visitors and we appreciate having been included in this.
I'm glad John got you guys signed up.
Yes, you took us a lot of places where we had been, and then took us a lot of places around those same places that we had not been.
Yeah.
So it really added to our travel experience.
Cool. Good deal.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody for your attention tonight. Thanks again to Dean for your time and getting everything together and getting everything figured out on your end. Wanted to toss out a shameless plug. We've got another presentation lined up for about a month from now. We've got John Fielder and Jerry Norgren-Neff are going to be presenting on the naming of the Colorado 14ers and some of the history associated with that. So feel free to head on over to cmc.org and go to the calendar and you can get signed up for it. But otherwise, I wish everyone a very happy evening. Thanks again, and we hope to see you in the future for another Zoom program. Have a good night.
Thanks, Dean.
You bet. You're
Thanks
very
so
welcome.
much, Dean.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you for signing up.
Hey, I know it can be real tough to present when you can't see your audience and get feedback and everything, but that was really awesome and your jokes were hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I learned some new dexterity on the cursor. Mouse.
Thanks a lot, Dean.
You're very welcome.
Hey, good job, Dean from South Carolina, brother.
All right, Brad. Thanks, buddy. Coming from you, that means a lot.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Thanks, Dean. Great show.
You're welcome, Bob.
And we'll head back to the Grand Canyon whenever you want to.
I'm ready to go.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Good luck with the next Snowmageddon.
Good night.
Good night.